Hi, welcome to another video for eSol purchasing system. Today we will be discussing how we're going to be implementing on the system and the workflow and the roles for the users and how to process the purchasing cycle, how to make the system understand because eSol purchasing system is a fully dynamic system. So once it receives this set of rules and with a workflow for it, it will follow that step to make sure that each works smoothly and there is no conflict between any other school. So let's dive in and give that more explanation. So in order to do that, we need to go to the roles and workflow. First of all, we need to assign a workflow or create a workflow. In our current case, we have one, which is the eSol purchasing workflow. How do we create it? We can simply either click by new workflow, or if we have a current workflow, we just click on edit, and we'll find this under a code and a name. And as we mentioned before, it is best to be preferred to use the acronym of a long name if it's a very long name. If not, we prefer to have the code the same as the name to make it easier to index as well as to search for. Once we create the workflow, if there is any other workflow that needs to be created, we just click new and we follow the same process. We put the code, the name, and any brief description if we want. We do submit and exit, or submit, or we get back. As you can see, the workflow window is fairly simple. It has the amount of entries, records in use, not in use, the standard form, show records, and as well as the search bar to search for. After we create the workflow and assign the name for it, we will go to the workflow steps. What is the workflow step? This is the window that is assigned to give a brief description and understanding of how the workflow will be going. What are the states, when will it start, and when will it end? Like a brief summary of it. For example, when we choose a new step, we have the option click in new step and describe the steps. You will see multiple things in that window, like the code, the name, and if we choose here the workflow, we find we have one, but if we have more, we can search for it by typing in that search bar. And once we select that, there are a bunch of other stuff that we need to make sure that we have. It's either to identify this step as an initial state, last state, or send notification email with the step number and with the color coded for it. To give further explanation, let's dive into some samples of the steps. For example, we have step 1, which is the draft. We chose this color for it to identify that we are right now the user or the person who is making this purchase order is drafting his order. This is the first step that what they do. So in order to do that, we can just click on edit and you will find that we have made the code the same as the name because it's very short. We chose the workflow, which is the current workflow that we have, or if we have any other workflow, we can use that. After that, we chose that this is an initial state. Initial state means that this is the beginning of the cycle or the workflow, how it would go and how the cycle will work with the purchase order. We will put it as step 1 and we chose color coded from the palette. Same goes for the other steps, but what is extra for it is this. For example, the next step is the request for head of department approval. And we chose smaller code for it to make it short and easy to find. This step, we checked something called send notification mail, which we said we will discuss. Send notification mail means that once this step occurred in the workflow, all parties involved need to be notified, which is in this case the head of department and the teacher, when the order is submitted and when the order is accepted or rejected. It's the same way. All things need to be notified by mail that is registered for the users within the system. And this will be step 2. Same goes for the other steps. It will keep going like that. It's either for the head of year or the principal. The system will dynamically understand this workflow or these steps according to the roles and the sequence of the roles that we're going to be assigning, which we'll discuss a little bit later. So, as you can see, most of the steps are having emails, except for the final one, which is the completion. It will be identified as or marked as a final state. So if we open that, it is sent by an email notification as well as as confirmed as is the end state for it. Like there's no other states for the workflow. If there was any more steps, we can add them definitely and reorder them as much as we like. Once we go that, let's go to the role sequence and give you better understanding how it works. For example, right now, what we have is the process of the drafting for the user. Either the user who's requesting is from a certain department, like an English teacher or math teacher, biology teacher, or a year group leader or a year group teacher, like a class teacher, for example, and he wants to send the request to his year group leader. If you can see the in the table in front of us, is that the action starts from and end to, for example, and this each time identify the steps. So we need to make sure that all our users are created properly with their roles and privileges on the system to make sure that they can follow the workflow to avoid any stoppage or any blocking for the request. Because if the user is created by mistake with not right privileges and roles, the cycle will still show to the higher levels of administration, but it will stop at that person because the system will, according to the steps that's created, will understand that this is the person that needs to approve to go to the next step. Like, for example, if we created head of year and there is no head of year, and the request should go to the head of year. So it will go to the head of year and stop until it approves to go to the next level, which is the principal in that case, or the director, depending on which is which. So let's dive in more and explain how to show the role and how the system understands the role that you assign with the sequence that you make. So first of all, for example, let's just dive in. So this is the department requester, or the first step within a department role as we described earlier, like for biology or chemistry or math. It shows in this step what the user can or cannot do. First of all, he can create a new document, which is in this case, request the purchase order and make the draft. Require for approval, yes, these steps require for him to send for approval. If it is school related or not school related, the school related checkbox indicates that this is an academic staff request, or this is an academic staff, because some of the purchase order can be made as well with non-academic staff or the admin staff. So this ensures that this system understands that this is school-related request. There's other text that you can see here, like section-related, which is depending on a whole year group or whole section, for example, like primary, secondary, or early years, or a year group related, like if it's for a certain year group. Of course, all of that steps will follow each one by one until it gets to the final approval. And it's not school related. It depends on each school individually. So each sequence of that can be done each per school. It's not assigned per one school. It can be different for each school, and this is how ESOL purchasing system have the full dynamic range of understanding and managing the workflow for each school. Finally, if it's a subject related, because right now what we mentioned, it's a department requester, so it's going to be math, science, English, for example, or chemistry. So it is a subject related and it's school related. He can create a new document, which is the purchase order, and require approval. We even give a brief description, as you see. Subject requester is the teacher who teaches a subject among different year group. So just a brief description for anyone who cannot understand. After that, we choose the workflow. And this is the key part to make the system understand. We need to choose the starting and the ending for each role. So for example, the department requester or the year group requester, depending on whatever kind of teacher that they are, the who's making the order, we make to make sure that they have their starting point and the ending point in the sequence. Because if that does not apply within the rules, the system will understand that there's another option, which I will show you the following role. So he will start from making a draft, and the end step will be, or the end role will be, requesting the head of department approval. This is the case, and this is the number one in the sequence. This will start as the first step in the sequence. Let's take an example and say Cairo English School does not have a department request or a teacher for a subject, like a subject teacher or departments. It has just year groups. The system will understand because we will give it the same sequence, which is number one, but as a year group. It will go to the same starting step. If this does not available, it will go to the other one, which means there is no conflict whatever, and it's fully dynamic range for any school to assign according to their structure and their roles. So, for example, if there is no head of department or there is no department requester and there is a year group requester, it will be the same logic, but instead of subject related, it will be year group related, and it can be according to section, of course, because if it's a year group, depending on which year group, if it's a year group for primary, then it will require a section. If it's a secondary, it will require to choose from secondary. So it's matching both the year group and the section. And as we described, you will see within the brief description, is a teacher who teaches the same subject for a specific year group and require the head of year approval. Of course, in the same step, we'll be choosing a workflow that we need to do, which we mentioned that we can use other workflows if needed. If there's another workflow that has been created for a certain different school, that can be used. In addition to that, we need to make the starting step, as we mentioned, and the ending step. Once we do that and we put it in the sequence, which is number 1, and within the sequence, same as the other one, and that's how the system will understand if this first step is not appearing or not matching within, it will go to the first step of the second logic. And this concept will keep applying again and again and again for each one of the users, like for each cycle. In step 2, for example, we'll try the head of department. The head of department requests the principal. If there is no head of department, it will go to the head of year, which will request from the principal. Same goes. So the principal, then the director, then the school admin. Each one of the steps is showing depending on how you want the structure or the cycle of the sequence for the workflow for the purchase order to go within your organization. So, for example, let's go to the director to give a brief explanation. Right now, as you see, the starting point for the director, it has more options. Reason for that being is this is to make sure that he can access at any level from the starting point. So from the head of year or head of department or the director or the principal, it can access all of that. And then it can send to the final approval. The more we add in the starting point, it means that the user can have privilege to access any part within that cycle. So this is in case, for example, the director, let's give addition to another thing more. Let's say, for example, the final stage. The final stage can access starting actually from the draft. The person who has the final approval can access starting from the draft up to the principal approval or the director approval. As you can see, it has all of the access level right here. And the end step, it will be the completion. And of course, we don't need to forget to give it the sequence number. As you can see, the role window is fairly simple and is fairly descriptive. Of course, it has all the standards feature for all the windows in the ESOL purchasing system, like the in use, not in use, or records. Of course, we can just keep any records. For example, if we don't have the department request, we can just make it not in use and submit and exit, and it will not show. If we filter, it will show straight back to us. If we choose to choose all record, it will show to that because it's following the same standard as the other windows. The amount of entries we can decide from here. If we want to search, the search bar is also available. And if there is any role that is required, what we simply can do is this. We just simply click on new role sequence and give it a description. Depending on, of course, what is the criteria needed and how it will fit within the workflow. This concludes our video in regards to the workflow and how it's designed and how we can assign the steps and how to give privileges to the user throughout the whole cycle of the purchasing order. Until the next video, wish you a nice time.